The mess hall erupted in chaos as the pot crashed to the floor, scalding soup splashing across the concrete, sending soldiers scrambling backward from the steaming mess. But in that split second, when her protective glove slipped away, every eye in that room locked onto the small black mark etched into her wrist, a mark that shouldn't exist on someone assigned to kitchen duty. A mark that made hardened veterans stop breathing. Staff Sergeant Maria Vasquez had been scrubbing pots for 3 weeks now, her hands raw from industrial soap, her back aching from hunching over endless steel basins, while around her, the other soldiers whispered about the new girl who never spoke about her past, never joined their conversations, never seemed to belong anywhere. Except behind that kitchen counter where she worked in silence, with a precision that seemed almost mechanical. The accident happened during the evening meal prep, when the massive soup pot tilted too far and gravity took over. But as Maria instinctively reached out to catch it, her thick rubber glove caught on the pot handle and peeled away, exposing her left wrist to the harsh fluorescent lights, exposing the small, intricate tattoo that identified her as something far beyond what anyone in this kitchen could have imagined. Omega Unit, the most classified special operations group in military history. A unit so secret that most generals didn't even know it existed. The dining hall fell silent, as if someone had sucked all the oxygen from the room, because every soldier worth their salt knew what that mark meant, even if they'd never seen one in person, even if they'd only heard whispers in the darkest corners of the most classified briefings about operators so elite, so dangerous, that they moved through conflicts like ghosts, leaving no trace, except the impossible missions that somehow got completed. Private Johnson was the first to find his voice, his fork clattering against his tray as he stammered out the question that hung in the air like smoke. "That's not possible." Maria stood there, frozen, her bare wrist still exposed to the room full of staring eyes, while soup continued to spread across the floor at her feet, and she realized in that moment that her carefully constructed cover was blown, that the quiet anonymity she'd built over 3 weeks of deliberate mediocrity had shattered like glass against concrete. She'd been assigned to this base under direct orders from command, after her last mission in Syria went sideways, leaving her team scattered to the wind, and her own psychological evaluation flagged for immediate reassignment to non-combat duties. But what command didn't understand, what they couldn't grasp, was that putting an Omega operator on kitchen duty wasn't rehabilitation, it was slow torture. Watching regular soldiers go about their daily routines while she scrubbed pots and pretended not to notice the tactical errors in their training exercises. The silence stretched until Sergeant Collins stepped forward, his weathered face creased with confusion and something that might have been awe. "Ma'am, I don't understand what you're doing here." The formality in his voice cut through the kitchen noise like a blade, because suddenly every soldier in that room understood they'd been serving alongside someone whose clearance level was so far above theirs that she probably knew about operations they'd never even heard, of missions that would never make it into any official record. Maria slowly pulled her glove back on her movements, deliberate and controlled, while 30 pairs of eyes tracked every gesture. "I'm assigned to kitchen duty," she said, her voice steady but carrying an undertone that suggested this conversation was over before it started. But Private Martinez couldn't let it go, couldn't accept that someone with an Omega mark was spending her days peeling potatoes and washing dishes when she should be leading missions that would never officially exist. "But ma'am, your qualifications, your training, why are you here instead of what, soldier?" The question hung in the air, sharp and dangerous, because Maria had learned that the hardest part of being reassigned wasn't the mundane work or the boredom. It was the constant reminder that she was no longer trusted with the missions that had defined her entire adult life. that somewhere in a classified file, her psychological profile had been marked with red flags that kept her away from active duty. The kitchen had become a theater, and every soldier was an audience member watching a drama they didn't fully understand, but couldn't look away from. Because the woman standing in front of them represented something mythical, something that existed in the spaces between official military doctrine and the impossible missions that somehow got completed without anyone ever talking about how Maria began cleaning up the spilled soup, her movements efficient and precise, while around her soldiers slowly returned to their meals. But the atmosphere had changed permanently because now everyone knew that the quiet woman who'd been serving their food and cleaning their dishes was someone who'd operated in places that didn't appear on any map, completing objectives that would never be acknowledged by any government. Over the following days, the dynamic shifted in ways both subtle and profound. Soldiers who'd barely noticed her before now watched her work with fascination, trying to spot signs of her training in the way she moved or held herself, trying to understand how someone with her background had ended up assigned to the most mundane duty on the base. Some approached her with questions about missions or tactics, but Maria maintained her silence. Her answers clipped and professional, while inside she battled the growing frustration of being treated like a museum, exhibit something rare and dangerous that people wanted to examine from a safe distance. The base commander, Colonel Harrison, called her into his office on a Thursday morning, his expression unreadable, as he gestured for her to sit across from his desk. "Sergeant Vasquez, your cover seems to have been compromised." Maria sat at attention, her posture perfect, despite 3 weeks of kitchen duty. "Yes, sir. The men are asking questions about your presence here, about why someone with your qualifications is peeling potatoes instead of leading tactical operations." The colonel's office felt smaller than it should have with its standard military furnishings, and the weight of unspoken questions filling the space between them, because both of them knew that Maria's assignment wasn't punishment. It was protective custody for someone whose last mission had left psychological scars that command wasn't sure would heal properly. "Sir, my orders were clear kitchen duty until further evaluation. Your orders were also to maintain operational security, which seems to have failed." The accusation stung because Maria prided herself on precision, on following orders exactly as given. But she hadn't anticipated that a simple accident would expose her to the kind of scrutiny that made maintaining her cover impossible. Colonel Harrison leaned back in his chair, studying her with the expression of someone trying to solve a puzzle that didn't quite make sense. "Tell me, Sergeant, what's it like going from missions that reshape international boundaries to washing dishes for soldiers who think tactical planning means deciding which MRE to eat?" The question was more personal than professional, and Maria felt something crack inside her chest, because for 3 weeks she'd been asking herself the same thing, wondering if this was what the rest of her military career would look like: mundane tasks performed by someone trained for extraordinary circumstances. "Sir, it's an adjustment." "I imagine it is." The colonel opened a file on his desk. Maria's file, she realized from the thickness and the classification markings along the edges. "Your psychological evaluation after Syria noted signs of survivor's guilt, operational fatigue, and what the doctors called an unhealthy attachment to mission completion over personal safety." Maria's jaw tightened because she remembered the evaluation, remembered sitting in a sterile office, while some doctor who'd never been in combat asked her questions about trauma and stress responses, as if her experiences could be quantified and categorized like inventory in a warehouse. The doctor recommended immediate reassignment to non-combat duties with ongoing psychological support. "Yes, sir." But what the doctor didn't understand, what none of them understand, is that taking someone like you away from operational duties isn't therapy. It's slow suffocation. The colonel's words hit Maria like a physical blow, because he'd articulated something she'd been struggling to understand herself, the feeling that every day in the kitchen was another day of dying, slowly of losing pieces of herself that she might never get back. "Sir, I follow my orders." "I know you do, Sergeant, but orders don't always account for the human element for what happens when you take a precision instrument and ask it to perform crude tasks." Maria felt tears threatening at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back because crying in a colonel's office wasn't something Omega operators did, even former Omega operators reassigned to kitchen duty. "What are you saying, sir?" Colonel Harrison closed her file and leaned forward, his expression shifting from official to something more personal. "I'm saying that maybe it's time we found a better use for your particular skill set, something that bridges the gap between who you were and who command thinks you need to become." The possibility hung in the air between them, fragile and dangerous, because Mariah had spent 3 weeks accepting that her operational career was over, that she'd never again feel the adrenaline rush of mission planning or the satisfaction of completing objectives that seemed impossible. There's a training unit being formed for special operations candidates, soldiers, who show potential for advanced tactical work, but need specialized instruction from someone who's actually been there. Maria's pulse quickened, because training meant sharing knowledge, meant using her experience in a way that could benefit others, even if she couldn't return to active missions herself. You'd be training the next generation of operators, passing on lessons learned from missions that officially never happened. The irony wasn't lost on her, that her punishment might become her redemption, that the skills command thought made her too dangerous for active duty might make her perfect for shaping future operators who would face the same impossible choices. She'd faced, "Sir, I accept." "Good, because your first class starts Monday and Sergeant." "Yes, sir. No more kitchen duty." Maria felt something she hadn't experienced in 3 weeks, hope mixed with purpose, mixed with the understanding that maybe this wasn't the end of her story, but a transition to a different kind of mission. One that would require all her tactical knowledge and hard-earned wisdom. Word spread through the base, faster than Maria expected, because by evening Chow's soldiers were looking at her differently. Not with curiosity about her past, but with respect for what she represented, someone who'd operated at the highest levels and was now willing to share that knowledge with others. Private Johnson approached her table during dinner, his expression nervous, but determined. "Ma'am, I heard about the training unit." Maria looked up from her meal, noting the careful formality in his posture, the way he stood at parade rest, even in the informal setting of the mess hall. "What about it, Private?" "I'd like to apply, ma'am, if that's possible." The request surprised her, because Johnson had seemed like a standard infantry soldier, competent but not exceptional. Someone who followed orders and completed assignments without showing particular aptitude for advanced operations. "What makes you think you're qualified for specialized training?" "Honestly, ma'am, I don't know if I am, but watching you these past weeks, even just doing kitchen duty, I could see there was something different about how you approached everything with precision and purpose. And I want to learn that." Maria studied his face, looking for signs of the kind of dedication that separated successful operators from casualties, because advanced training wasn't just about skills, it was about mental resilience and the ability to make impossible decisions under pressure. Training will be harder than anything you've experienced. Private, it will push you beyond your physical and psychological limits, and there's no guarantee you'll complete the program. "I understand, ma'am." "Do you? Because understanding intellectually and understanding viscerally are two very different things." Johnson straightened his shoulders, his expression resolving into something more determined. "Ma'am, I've been infantry for 2 years, and every day I feel like I'm capable of more, like there's potential I'm not using. And if you're willing to train soldiers who want to push themselves beyond standard operations, then I want that chance." Maria recognized something in his voice. The hunger for challenge, for purpose beyond routine. that she'd felt throughout her own career, the drive that separated operators from soldiers who were content with standard assignments. Report to Training Base 7 at 0600 Monday morning. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. As Johnson walked away, Maria realized she was feeling something she hadn't experienced since Syria anticipation. For a mission that mattered for work, that would challenge her abilities and contribute to something larger than herself. Over the weekend, more soldiers approached her, some with formal requests, others with casual questions about the training program. But all sharing a common thread, the desire to push themselves beyond their current limitations, to access levels of training that weren't available through standard military channels by Sunday evening. Maria had a list of 12 candidates each with different backgrounds and motivations, but all showing the kind of determination that suggested they might survive the program she was designing in her head, a curriculum that would blend psychological resilience with tactical innovation, with the hard lessons learned from missions that pushed operators beyond conventional boundaries. Monday morning arrived cold and gray, with fog rolling across the training grounds as Maria walked toward the Training Base 7, carrying the weight of expectations and the responsibility of shaping soldiers who might one day face the same impossible choices that had defined her career. The 12 candidates were already assembled, standing at attention in perfect formation, their faces showing varying degrees of nervousness and determination, because word had spread about what this training might entail, about the instructor who'd operated in places that didn't appear on official maps. Maria stood before them, taking in their posture, their expressions, their readiness to begin something that would either transform them into elite operators or break them in ways that would end their military careers. Gentlemen, welcome to Advanced Tactical Operations Training. Her voice carried across the training bay, sharp and clear with the authority that came from years of leading missions, where failure meant death for entire teams. Over the next 6 months, I will teach you skills that aren't covered in any manual. I will push you beyond every limit you thought you had. I will show you how to think like an operator instead of a soldier. She began walking along the line of candidates, studying each face, looking for signs of doubt or false bravado, because both would be dangerous in the kind of training she had planned. But first, you need to understand what you're volunteering for. This isn't advanced infantry training. This isn't special forces preparation. This is something different, something that will require you to question everything you think you know about military tactics and personal limitations. Private Johnson stood third from the left, his expression focused and alert. While beside him, Private Martinez looked nervous, but determined, his hands clasped behind his back in perfect parade rest. The missions you'll train for are the ones that don't officially exist, the operations that require psychological flexibility, tactical innovation, and the ability to operate in moral gray areas where standard rules of engagement don't apply. Maria paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the group, because this was the moment when candidates usually began to understand what they had volunteered, and for the difference between wanting to be elite and being willing to pay the price that elite status demanded. Some of you will quit before the end of the first week. Some will wash out during psychological evaluation. And some will complete the training only to discover that you don't want the kind of assignments that come with these skills. She moved to the center of the formation, her presence commanding attention without effort, because everything about her posture and bearing spoke of experience earned through trials that most soldiers couldn't imagine. But for those who complete the program, for those who demonstrate the mental resilience and tactical aptitude required, you'll become part of something that exists in the spaces between official military doctrine, something that operates where conventional forces can't or won't go. The training bay fell silent, except for the distant sounds of standard military exercises, because every candidate understood they were standing at a threshold that would either elevate their military careers or destroy them. Your first exercise begins now. Maria gestured toward a series of obstacles arranged throughout the training bay. Not standard military obstacles, but configurations that required creative problem-solving and tactical thinking rather than just physical strength. You have 30 minutes to navigate this course. But the objective isn't to finish fastest, it's to demonstrate tactical decision-making under pressure. She moved to an observation platform overlooking the course, while the candidate studied the layout, trying to identify the best approach. Because this wasn't about athletic ability, it was about thinking like an operator, analyzing variables, and making decisions that balanced speed with strategic advantage. Begin. The candidates moved forward, each choosing different approaches to the first obstacle. And Maria watched their decision-making processes, noting who took time to analyze before acting, who relied on pure physical effort, who showed signs of innovative thinking under pressure. Private Johnson chose a route that seemed longer, but offered better tactical positioning, while Private Martinez went for the direct approach that required more physical strength but less strategic thinking. As they progressed through the course, Maria began to see patterns, emerging indicators of who might have the mental flexibility required for advanced operations and who was still thinking like conventional infantry. The exercise revealed more than tactical aptitude. It showed psychological responses to pressure decision-making under time constraints and the ability to adapt when initial strategies proved inadequate, because these were the qualities that separated elite operators from highly trained soldiers. After 30 minutes, Maria called the exercise to a halt and gathered the candidates for evaluation. Not of their performance, but of their thought processes, because understanding why they made specific choices was more important than how quickly they completed the course. Johnson, why did you choose the longer route to the third obstacle? Ma'am, the direct route offered speed, but no tactical advantage. If this were a real mission, I'd want positioning that allowed for multiple exit strategies. Maria nodded because his answer showed the kind of strategic thinking that could be developed into operational excellence. The understanding that tactical success often required sacrificing immediate gains for strategic advantage. Martinez, you went for speed over positioning. Explain your reasoning. Ma'am, I assessed that time pressure was the primary variable, and that completing the objective quickly was more important than tactical positioning. The answer revealed conventional military thinking efficient, but lacking the complexity required for missions where standard doctrine didn't apply, where operators had to balance multiple variables simultaneously. In advanced operations, speed without strategic advantage often leads to mission failure or casualties because the environments you'll operate in don't forgive tactical shortcuts. Maria began walking among the candidates while she continued the evaluation because physical proximity added psychological pressure that revealed how soldiers responded to authority and scrutiny. The missions you'll train for require thinking beyond conventional parameters, beyond the standard military framework of objectives and rules of engagement. She paused in front of each candidate, making eye contact that conveyed both assessment and challenge, because this was where many soldiers discovered they weren't ready for the psychological demands of elite operations. Advanced tactical operations exist in moral and strategic gray areas, where you'll make decisions that can't be justified through standard military doctrine, where success depends on your ability to adapt, innovate, and operate independently. The weight of her words settled over the group, because every candidate was beginning to understand that this training would challenge not just their physical abilities, but their fundamental understanding of what it meant to be a soldier. Your next exercise will test psychological resilience under pressure. Maria led them to a different section of the training facility where she'd arranged a scenario that would push candidates beyond their comfort zones, not through physical challenge, but through psychological stress that mimicked the kind of pressure they'd face in actual operations. You'll be divided into teams of 3. Each team will receive mission parameters that require tactical decision-making under time pressure with incomplete information. The scenario was designed to create the kind of stress that revealed character under pressure, because elite operations required soldiers who could make sound decisions, even when circumstances were chaotic and information was limited. Team leaders will be responsible for mission success, but will have to rely on team members whose capabilities and reliability are unknown. Maria assigned leadership roles based on her observations from the obstacle course, putting soldiers in positions that would either confirm or challenge her initial assessments of their potential. Mission parameters are classified. Until you reach your designated areas, you'll have limited communication with command, and you'll be required to adapt your strategy based on changing circumstances. The exercise began with teams moving to different sections of the training facility, each carrying sealed orders that wouldn't be opened until they reached their assigned positions, because uncertainty and incomplete information were constants in advanced operations. Team 1, led by Johnson, moved with careful precision, each member staying alert while maintaining formation discipline that showed respect for tactical procedures, even in training scenarios. Team 2, under Martinez's leadership, moved faster, but with less attention to strategic positioning, showing the kind of conventional military efficiency that worked well for standard operations, but might prove inadequate for complex missions. Team 3, led by Private Cooper, showed innovation in their movement patterns, adapting their formation to terrain changes and potential threat vectors in ways that suggested natural tactical aptitude. From her observation post, Maria watched each team's progress, noting decision-making patterns, communication styles, and leadership approaches, because these indicators would help her identify which candidates had the potential for advanced development. The sealed orders contained scenarios designed to test moral flexibility, tactical innovation, and decision-making under pressure, because elite operations required soldiers who could function effectively, even when standard protocols didn't provide clear guidance. Team 1's scenario involved a hostage rescue with civilian casualties already occurred, requiring them to balance mission completion with humanitarian concerns while operating under time pressure. Team 2 faced a reconnaissance mission, where gathering intelligence required operating in civilian areas without revealing their military identity, requiring tactical discretion and cultural sensitivity. Team 3 received orders for a sabotage mission, where success depended on creative problem-solving and the ability to improvise solutions using limited resources. Each scenario was designed to push candidates beyond conventional military thinking into the kind of complex decision-making that characterized elite operations, where success often depended on psychological flexibility rather than tactical superiority. As the exercises progressed, Maria monitored radio communications, noting how team leaders adapted to changing circumstances, how they communicated with team members, and how they balanced mission objectives with ethical considerations. Johnson's team showed systematic decision-making that balanced tactical efficiency with careful attention to potential consequences, while Martinez's group focused primarily on mission completion. Without fully considering strategic implications, Cooper's team demonstrated innovative thinking that suggested natural aptitude for unconventional operations, but sometimes at the expense of proper risk assessment and safety protocols. After 2 hours, Maria called all teams back to the training bay for debriefing, because understanding what happened was less important than understanding why it happened and how different approaches might affect mission outcomes in real operational environments. Team leaders report on your decision-making process, not your results, but your reasoning. Johnson stood first, his bearing confident, but not arrogant, as he described how his team approached their scenario. "Ma'am, we prioritized civilian safety while maintaining mission focus, because in hostile territory, local population support can be critical for extraction and future operations. His answers showed the kind of strategic thinking that looked beyond immediate tactical objectives to consider broader operational implications, and the understanding that military success often depended on factors that weren't immediately apparent. Martinez reported next, his tone defensive, as he explained his team's focus on mission completion over other considerations. "Ma'am, we assessed that completing the objective quickly was the primary requirement, and that other factors were secondary to mission success." The response revealed conventional military thinking that prioritized clear objectives over complex strategic considerations, the kind of approach that worked well for standard operations, but could prove dangerous in elite missions. Cooper's report showed creativity and tactical innovation, but also revealed gaps in risk assessment that could prove fatal in actual operations. "Ma'am, we improvised solutions that weren't covered in standard procedure because the mission parameters seemed to require thinking outside conventional frameworks." His approach showed promise, but also highlighted the need for additional training in balancing innovation with proper safety protocols because creativity without discipline often led to casualties in operational environments. Maria spent the next hour breaking down each team's performance, not to criticize, but to illustrate how different approaches might play out in real missions where mistakes had permanent consequences. Advanced operations require balancing multiple variables simultaneously: mission objectives, civilian considerations, team safety, strategic implications, and political ramifications. She used specific examples from their exercises to demonstrate how seemingly minor tactical decisions could have major strategic consequences because elite operators needed to understand that their actions often had implications far beyond immediate military objectives. "The missions you'll eventually face will require making decisions with incomplete information under extreme pressure, while maintaining awareness of consequences that extend beyond your immediate tactical situation." The candidates listened with increasing seriousness because they were beginning to understand that advanced tactical training wasn't just about enhanced skills. It was about accepting responsibility for decisions that could affect international relations, strategic partnerships, and global security. "Tomorrow we begin psychological resilience training, which will push you beyond your current understanding of stress pressure and decision-making under duress." Mariah dismissed the candidates, but several lingered, wanting to ask questions about the training or their performance. Because the day had challenged their assumptions about military service and their own capabilities, Johnson approached her with the careful respect of someone who understood. He was in the presence of expertise he couldn't yet comprehend. "Ma'am, today's training raised questions about conventional military doctrine, about whether standard procedures are adequate for complex operations." His observation showed the kind of thinking that could be developed into operational excellence. The willingness to question established procedures when circumstances demanded innovative approaches. Advanced operations exist precisely because conventional military doctrine has limitations, because there are situations where the standard procedures don't provide adequate solutions. Maria appreciated his willingness to engage with complex ideas because intellectual curiosity was essential for soldiers who would eventually operate in environments where tactical manuals provided no guidance. But questioning doctrine doesn't mean abandoning discipline. It means understanding when flexibility serves strategic objectives better than rigid adherence to procedure. The distinction was crucial because elite operators needed to balance innovative thinking with proper respect for military structure and chain of command, even when operating independently. Over the following weeks, the training intensified with exercises designed to push candidates beyond their psychological and tactical comfort zones, because advanced operations required soldiers who could function effectively under conditions that would break conventional military personnel. Physical conditioning was combined with psychological stress tests that revealed how candidates responded to pressure exhaustion and moral complexity, because elite missions often required peak performance under circumstances that challenged every aspect of military training. Maria watched several candidates wash out, not because they lacked physical ability or tactical aptitude, but because they couldn't adapt to the psychological demands of operating in moral gray areas where standard military ethics provided inadequate guidance. Private Johnson emerged as a natural leader, showing tactical innovation combined with solid decision-making under pressure, while maintaining proper respect for team safety and mission parameters. Private Martinez struggled with the psychological aspects of training, showing difficulty adapting to scenarios where standard military procedures didn't provide clear answers to tactical problems. Private Cooper displayed exceptional tactical creativity, but needed additional development in risk assessment and team leadership because innovation without proper judgment could prove dangerous in operational environments. By the end of the first month, Maria had identified 4 candidates with genuine potential for advanced operations, soldiers who combined tactical aptitude with psychological resilience, and the intellectual flexibility required for missions that existed outside conventional military frameworks. The training evolved to include scenarios based on actual classified missions, adapted to protect operational security, while providing realistic experience with the kind of decision-making that characterized elite operations. Candidates faced moral dilemmas that had no clear solutions, tactical challenges that required innovative thinking and leadership scenarios, where success depended on balancing competing priorities under extreme pressure. Maria found herself remembering why she'd been drawn to elite operations. Originally, the intellectual challenge of solving impossible problems, the satisfaction of succeeding where conventional approaches failed, the knowledge that her skills contributed to missions that shaped international events. Teaching these candidates wasn't just about passing on tactical knowledge. It was about identifying and developing the next generation of operators who would face the same impossible choices that had defined her career. The base commander visited the training facility several times, observing exercises and reviewing candidate progress because the program was being watched at levels far above the local command structure. Colonel Harrison spoke with Maria privately after one particularly intensive training session. The candidates are showing remarkable development in a relatively short time. Maria nodded because she'd seen the transformation herself, watched conventional soldiers evolve into something more complex, more capable of handling the psychological and tactical demands of elite operations. They're learning to think beyond standard military parameters, to approach problems with creativity while maintaining proper discipline. Command is taking notice of this program. Sergeant, there's discussion about expanding it, making it a permanent training pipeline for advanced operations. The possibility excited Maria because it suggested her reassignment might become something more significant than rehabilitation. It might become a new career path that utilized her experience while contributing to future operational capability. Sir, I believe there's genuine need for this kind of training soldiers who show potential for advanced operations, but never get the specialized instruction they need to develop those capabilities. Colonel Harrison agreed, because he'd seen the results in his own candidate soldiers, who'd shown steady improvement in tactical thinking, psychological resilience, and leadership capability under pressure. There's also discussion about your own future sergeant, about whether someone with your experience should remain limited to training duties. The suggestion hung in the air, dangerous and tempting, because Maria had begun to hope that her operational career might not be over. That the skills command thought made her too dangerous for active duty might make her valuable for specialized missions. Sir, I serve where I'm needed. I know you do, but the question is where you're needed most. in a training facility developing future operators, or back in the field leading missions that require your particular expertise. The conversation reminded Maria that her reassignment had always been temporary, that the psychological evaluation that brought her to kitchen duty was meant to determine whether she could return to operational status, not to end her career permanently. That evening, Maria walked the perimeter of the base, thinking about the choices that had brought her to this point. With the mission in Syria that had gone wrong, the psychological evaluation that questioned her fitness for duty, the 3 weeks of kitchen duty that had felt like slow death. But now, she had purpose again. Meaningful work that challenged her abilities and contributed to something larger than herself, the knowledge that she was shaping soldiers who might one day face the same impossible decisions that had defined her career. The training program continued with increasing intensity as candidates developed the skills and psychological resilience required for advanced operations, while Maria found herself rediscovering the satisfaction of military service that went beyond individual achievement. 6 months after the accident in the kitchen that had exposed her Omega mark, Maria stood before a graduation ceremony for the first class of Advanced Tactical Operations candidates, watching soldiers she'd transformed from conventional infantry into something approaching elite operators command, had flown in officials from Washington to observe the ceremony. Because the program had exceeded all expectations, producing candidates with tactical capabilities and psychological resilience that impressed even experienced Special Operations personnel, Colonel Harrison delivered the opening remarks, but when he called Maria forward to address the graduates, she realized this was more than a training completion. It was validation of her worth as an instructor and possibly a preview of her future in military service. Graduates, you have completed training that pushed you beyond every limit you thought you had. You have learned to think like operators instead of soldiers, to make decisions in moral gray areas, where standard doctrine provides no guidance. Maria looked at each graduate, remembering their struggles and breakthroughs, the moments when conventional thinking gave way to tactical innovation, when psychological barriers were overcome through determination and proper instruction. The skills you've developed will serve you in ways you cannot yet imagine, in missions that will challenge everything you've learned about military service and personal capability. Johnson stood at attention in the front row, his bearing transformed from conventional soldier to something more confident, more capable of handling complex tactical and psychological challenges. But remember that advanced capabilities bring advanced responsibilities, that operating beyond conventional parameters requires wisdom, judgment, and unwavering commitment to the values that define professional military service. The ceremony concluded with individual recognition for outstanding performance. But Maria felt the real victory was in watching former conventional soldiers carry themselves with the confidence that came from knowing they could handle whatever challenges their military careers might present. After the ceremony, Colonel Harrison approached her with news that would reshape her understanding of her future in military service. Sergeant Vasquez, your program has been approved for permanent establishment with you as the senior instructor. But there's also another opportunity. Maria waited because she'd learned that good news in military service often came with complications that weren't immediately apparent. Command wants to activate you for a special assignment, something that requires your operational experience combined with your proven ability to develop other personnel. The possibility of returning to operational status felt both exciting and terrifying. Because Maria had spent months rebuilding her confidence through teaching, without knowing whether she was ready to face the psychological challenges of actual missions. What kind of assignment, sir? Leading a team of your graduates on a mission that requires the kind of tactical innovation and psychological resilience you've been teaching. The opportunity represented everything Maria had hoped for during her months of rehabilitation, and the chance to prove that her operational capabilities hadn't been permanently damaged by Syria that she could still contribute to missions that mattered. "Sir, I accept." "Good, because the mission briefing is tomorrow and deployment is in 72 hours. As Maria walked back to her quarters, she realized that the accident in the kitchen that had seemed like the end of her operational career had actually been the beginning of something new, a path that combined her elite operational experience with the satisfaction of developing other personnel. The mission would test not just her own readiness to return to operational status, but the effectiveness of the training program she'd developed, because her graduates would face real tactical challenges that would either validate their preparation or reveal gaps in their development. That night, Maria reviewed the files of the 4 graduates selected for the mission: Johnson Martinez Cooper, and a 4th candidate who'd shown exceptional tactical aptitude, combined with strong leadership potential under pressure. Each file reminded her of the transformation she'd witnessed from conventional soldiers struggling with complex scenarios to operators capable of innovative thinking under psychological and tactical pressure. The mission briefing revealed an assignment that required exactly the kind of capabilities her training program had developed: tactical innovation in complex environments, psychological resilience under extreme pressure, and the ability to operate effectively despite incomplete information and moral ambiguity. As Maria prepared for her return to operational status, she realized that the months of teaching had changed her in ways she hadn't expected, had given her perspective on military service that went beyond individual achievement to include responsibility for developing others. The kitchen duty that had seemed like punishment had led to teaching assignment that had become career transformation that was now leading back to operational status, but with enhanced understanding of what elite military service truly meant. Standing in her quarters, looking at operational gear she hadn't worn in months, Maria felt ready not just to return to active duty, but to lead a mission that would test everything she'd learned about combining elite operational capabilities with effective leadership and personnel development, and the mission would begin tomorrow. But the real journey had started months ago in a kitchen, where an accident had exposed her identity and ultimately led to discovering a new path that honored both her operational experience and her capacity for developing the next generation of elite military personnel. Tomorrow, she would find out whether her months of rehabilitation and teaching had prepared her to return to the kind of missions that had once defined her identity. Whether the psychological wounds from Syria had healed enough to allow her to operate effectively at the highest levels of military service. But tonight, she felt something she hadn't experienced since before Syria: confidence in her abilities, purpose in her mission, and hope that her best contributions to military service might still lie ahead, rather than in the past she'd been trying to overcome. The Omega mark on her wrist still carried the weight of classified missions and elite capabilities, but now it also represented something new: the understanding that true operational excellence included the ability to develop others, to pass on hard-earned knowledge to soldiers who would face the same impossible choices that had shaped her career. In 12 hours, she would brief her graduates for their first operational mission together. And in 72 hours, they would deploy to test everything she'd taught them about tactical innovation, psychological resilience, and moral decision-making. Under pressure in environments where conventional military training provided inadequate preparation, the accident that had exposed her identity in the kitchen had led to the most meaningful assignment of her military career: the opportunity to combine elite operational experience with the satisfaction of developing others. And now the chance to prove that both she and her graduates were ready for the missions that existed in the spaces between official military doctrine. Maria set her alarm and settled in for the last night before returning to the kind of operational status she'd thought she'd lost forever. But with enhanced understanding of what it meant to serve at the highest levels of military capability, combined with responsibility for others who would carry forward the lessons learned through experience that couldn't be gained any other way.